The human legacy returns. The academy was in ruins. Smoke rose from broken towers, and the ground was marked with fire. Alien students who had once laughed, studied, and lived together now stood in silence, afraid of what would happen next. In the middle of the courtyard stood Ethan, his clothes torn, his face bruised, but his eyes burning with something stronger than fear. Around him stood dozens of alien girls, their bodies trembling, their minds shaken by the attack they had just survived. The invaders had come in the night, thinking the academy was weak. They had brought ships, soldiers, and strange weapons. But what they had not expected was a human. Ethan stood tall. He was not a soldier. He was just a boy placed in a strange academy, in a world far from Earth. Yet in this moment, every alien around him looked at him as if he carried something far greater than strength. He carried legacy. The silence after battle. One alien girl, Lyra, walked closer. Her silver eyes, usually filled with calm curiosity, were now wide with something new: respect. She had once stared at Ethan because he was strange, because humans were supposed to be legends. But now she stared because she had seen the truth. "You fought them like no one else," she whispered. "You did not run. You stood when even we wanted to hide." Ethan turned to her, his voice quiet but firm. "I wasn't fighting just for me. I was fighting for all of you." The words carried across the courtyard. Every alien girl who heard them felt a shiver run through her body. This boy was different. He wasn't like their kind. He wasn't shaped by their politics, their fear, or their traditions. He was human, and humanity had always been something more. The rumor becomes truth. For years across the galaxy, humans had been spoken of only in whispers. Some said they had vanished. Others said they were wiped out in wars long ago. Many thought humans were only myths told to scare children. But now, standing before them, was living proof. One alien girl, her voice shaking, asked, "Does that mean Earth is real? That your people still exist?" Ethan's eyes grew heavy with memory. "I don't know if Earth still stands. I don't know if my people survived. But I know one thing: humanity never dies. Not truly. As long as I breathe, the human legacy is alive." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, filled with awe. The alien students realized they were not only looking at a boy, they were looking at the last flame of something that could never be forgotten. The choice. From the shadows of the broken hall, a figure stepped forward. It was Headmaster Karan, the alien leader of the academy. His robes were torn, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp. "Do you understand what this means?" He said, his voice low. "If the galaxy learns that a human is alive, everything will change. Some will fear you, some will want to capture you, and some will want to follow you." Ethan looked around him. The girls he had studied with, the same ones who once whispered about him, stared at him, doubted him. Now they all looked at him with trust. "I didn't ask for this," Ethan said. "But maybe it was always meant to happen. Maybe I was put here to remind the galaxy what humans are." The human spirit Lyra stepped forward, placing her hand over her heart. "Then I will follow you," she said softly. Another alien girl nodded. "If you stand, I stand with you." Soon voices rose one by one until the whole courtyard echoed with a promise. They were no longer afraid. They were no longer divided. Because they had seen something powerful, something only humans could awaken. Not power through weapons, not fear through dominance, but courage. The legacy returns far above the academy. The sky was clearing. Smoke faded and stars appeared. Ethan raised his eyes to the heavens. Somewhere out there beyond the dark was Earth. Maybe lost, maybe waiting, but in this moment, surrounded by allies who once doubted him, Ethan understood. Humanity's strength was never in numbers, never in technology. It was in spirit. The spirit to stand when all others fall. The spirit to rise even when the galaxy tries to bury the truth. He was not just Ethan anymore. He was the return of a name the galaxy had forgotten. And as the stars burned above, a single truth echoed through the alien academy. The human legacy had returned. "Thought possible." Lyra stepped forward, her voice strong. "Behold, the human legacy is not dead, it rises again." Ethan looked around, stunned, as the crowd's cheers grew louder. For the first time, he realized this was only the beginning, the forbidden truth. The courtyard was still buzzing hours after the challenge. Students whispered Ethan's name, their eyes shining with excitement. A human had stood against an overseer, and won. But while the academy cheered, the council chambers were filled with fury. The overseer leader knelt before his masters, his head bowed in shame. The human, he used tricks, he growled. But he is dangerous. His presence is a threat to the order. High voices echoed across the chamber. Shadows loomed over the tall chairs where the alien council sat. Then he must be silenced, one voice declared coldly. Ethan sat in the library, still holding the cracked staff from the duel. His hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what had happened. Lyra entered quietly, her steps soft. "You did it. You gave them hope." Ethan shook his head. "Hope? I barely survived." "If he hadn't been blinded, you thought," Lyra interrupted gently. "That is what makes you different. Not brute force. That is what they fear most." Ethan stared at her. "They? You mean the overseers? Or the council?" Lyra hesitated. Her glowing eyes dimmed. "Both." Ethan frowned. "What aren't you telling me?" Lyra looked around the library as if walls themselves might be listening. Then she leaned closer. "There is something you must see. Something even more dangerous than the chamber." She pulled a small shard of crystal from her cloak. It pulsed faintly with light. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "A memory key," Lyra whispered. "It unlocks records that were sealed long ago. Records the council swore never to release." Ethan's chest tightened. "About humans?" Lyra nodded. They went deep below the academy, through tunnels few dared to enter. The air grew colder and the walls glowed faintly with runes. Finally, they reached a metal door. Ancient, rusted, but still sealed with energy locks. Lyra pressed the crystal shard into the center. The locks hissed and released. The door slid open. Inside was a chamber far older than the academy above. Dust clung to every surface. But what caught Ethan's eyes were the walls, lined with massive screens and glowing tablets. The machines flickered to life at Lyra's touch. Images filled the room. Ethan staggered back as he saw them. Humans, thousands of them, wearing armor of steel and fire. Human fleets battling side by side with alien ships, their banners flying high. Ethan whispered, "It's real." "All of it." Lyra's voice trembled. "Your people were not weak. They were the strongest allies the galaxy had ever known. Until the betrayal, the images shifted." Ethan's stomach turned as he saw humans surrounded by fleets, not enemies, but supposed allies. Ships of the very council he had seen above. Weapons turned against humanity. Planets burning. Ethan's throat tightened. "They didn't just erase us, they destroyed us." Lyra nodded, her face dark. "It was called the cleansing. The council feared humanity's spirit, that no cage could hold you, so they tried to wipe you out." Ethan's knees buckled. He clutched the wall, his breath shallow. "And Earth? My world? Spared," Lyra whispered, "but sealed, isolated, left to forget. The council made sure you would never rise again." Ethan's heart pounded. Rage burned in his chest, sharper than anything he had ever felt. All his life, humans had been told they were small, fragile, unimportant. But here was the truth. His people had once been giants and the galaxy had feared them. "Why show me this?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "Because you must choose. Stay silent, or carry this truth. If you reveal it, the council will hunt you without mercy. But if you hide it, your people remain forgotten." Ethan stared at the images again, his ancestors fighting, standing tall, unbroken. Something inside him stirred, deep and ancient. Before he could answer, the room shook. A voice boomed through hidden speakers. "Unauthorized access detected. Seal the chamber." The doors slammed shut. Red lights flashed. The machines crackled, starting to erase themselves. Ethan lunged forward. "No!" He grabbed the crystal shard, but the images were already burning away into static. Lyra's eyes widened. "They know we are here." The walls shook harder. Overseer boots thundered from above. Ethan clenched his fists around the shard. "Then they'll have to kill me to stop the truth." The chamber lights went dark. The forbidden truth had been awakened, and it could not be buried again. The attack, the underground chamber shook with thunder. Dust rained from the ceiling as Overseer boots pounded above. The red lights flashed brighter, alarms howling like angry beasts. "They've sealed every exit," Lyra hissed, pulling Ethan to his feet. "We must move now." Ethan clutched the glowing shard tightly. His heart hammered, but his voice was steady. "They're not just here to arrest us. They're here to erase us." Lyra's eyes flashed. "Exactly, and they won't stop until you are dead." The walls groaned as heavy cutters sliced through the metal door. Sparks flew. Shadows of armored figures appeared in the light. "Overseers," Ethan whispered. "Dozens of them." Lyra pulled a small sphere from her belt. It pulsed blue, humming. "Cover your eyes," she shouted, throwing it toward the door. The sphere exploded in a flash of searing light. The Overseers roared as their visors scrambled. Ethan and Lyra dashed into the nearest tunnel, their footsteps echoing like drums. They ran through winding corridors until the air grew cold. The tunnels opened into the Academy's lower courtyards, vast dark spaces lined with statues of alien heroes. But tonight, the statues stood as silent witnesses to war. Dozens of Overseers poured in from all sides, their weapons glowing red. Lyra drew a short blade, the steel singing in her hand. She stood ready. Ethan gripped his broken staff, his palms slick with sweat. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice calm. "They want fear. Do not give it." Ethan's chest tightened. "We can't fight them all." "No," Lyra agreed, her eyes narrowing. "But we can survive long enough to show the others who you are." The Overseers advanced. The ground trembled beneath their armored boots. The first clash was brutal. An Overseer swung at Ethan with a blade of crackling energy. Instinct took over. Ethan ducked, the strike missing his head by inches. He jabbed with his staff, striking the alien's leg. The blow barely dented the armor, but it forced the Overseer back. Another came from behind. Lyra spun, her blade flashing, slicing sparks from the enemy's chest plate. She moved like flowing fire, but there were too many. Ethan's lungs burned. He fought with desperation, blocking, dodging, using every ounce of speed he had. But for every enemy that staggered, two more pressed forward. "They'll crush us," he shouted. Lyra's eyes blazed. "Then let them see what a human does when cornered." The Overseer leader appeared at the far end of the courtyard, his crimson armor glowing like molten iron. His voice boomed through the chaos. "Seize the human! Leave no trace of the forbidden truth." The soldiers surged forward as one. Ethan's mind raced. His staff cracked against another helmet, his body aching with the effort. Then through the blur of battle, his eyes caught the tall statues towering above them. Monuments holding metal spears, weapons of stone and steel. An idea struck. "Lyra," he shouted. "The statues!" She followed his gaze. Understanding flashed across her face. Together they moved, dodging strikes, pushing toward the base of one statue. Ethan slammed his staff into the support beam. Lyra drove her blade into the cracks. The stone trembled. Overseers charged, weapons raised. Ethan roared, slamming the staff again with all his strength. The statue's base gave way. The giant figure toppled, crashing down like thunder. It smashed into a squad of Overseers, scattering them like broken toys. The ground shook as dust and stone filled the air. The crowd of students watching from the Academy's balconies erupted in gasps and cries. For the first time they saw it. A human fighting, not cowering. But the Overseer leader was not finished. He leapt forward, blade humming with deadly light. His strike shattered Ethan's staff in two. Ethan staggered back, his chest heaving. The leader towered over him. "You are nothing but a shadow of the past," the alien growled. Ethan's hands tightened around the shard in his pocket. His mind burned with the images he had seen, the flag, the fleets, the betrayal. He lifted his chin, refusing to bow. "No," he said, his voice strong. "I am the proof you tried to bury, and we don't vanish so easily." The Overseer lunged, only for Lyra to intercept, her blade clashing against his with a shriek of sparks. "Run!" she shouted. "You must live!" But Ethan didn't run. Instead, he grabbed a fallen weapon from the ground, a small energy blade still glowing. He met the Overseer's gaze, his fear gone. "This ends tonight," he whispered. The crowd above held its breath. The human, once forgotten, now stood face to face with the galaxy's enforcers, and he was ready to fight. The hidden chamber. The library was silent. Towers of books reached into the shadows, their spines glowing faintly with alien symbols. Ethan had never seen this place at night. It felt more alive, as if the shelves themselves whispered secrets. Lyra moved ahead, her steps soundless, her glowing eyes lighting the path. Ethan followed, unsure whether to trust her but too curious to turn back. "Why bring me here?" he asked in a low voice. "Because this is where the lies begin," she whispered. She led him through rows of ancient archives until they stopped at a wall, smooth, polished stone with no door. Ethan frowned. "There's nothing here." Lyra placed her hand against the stone. Her fingers shimmered with blue light, and the wall rippled like water. A hidden entrance appeared. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "How did you—" "Not all knowledge is meant for the public," she interrupted. "But some truths must be seen." They stepped inside. The chamber beyond was vast, lit by soft blue flames that burned without smoke. Strange devices hummed along the walls, machines older than the academy itself. In the center stood a single pedestal, and on it rested an object that made Ethan's breath catch. A flag, dusty, torn but unmistakable. A rectangle of deep blue with white stars. Ethan's throat tightened. "The flag of Earth," Lyra nodded slowly. "I thought you would recognize it." Ethan approached, his hands trembling. He had seen this flag in old books and history lessons back home. But here, in an alien academy that denied his people even existed. Why is this here?" His voice shook. Lyra's eyes softened. "Because the Council erased your kind from memory. But they could not erase everything. Some fragments remain, hidden, forbidden." Ethan turned to her, his face pale. "Erased? What do you mean erased?" Lyra gestured to the walls. With a flick of her hand, one of the machines projected a hologram into the air. It showed images, humans standing beside alien leaders, humans marching in wars long past, human ships flying in great fleets among the stars. Ethan's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Humanity never had this." Lyra shook her head. "You were told you never did. But long ago your people fought beside us. They were feared and respected until something happened." "What happened?" Ethan whispered, her voice lowered. "The Council betrayed your kind. They declared humanity too dangerous, too wild, and then they erased every record. Your history was sealed away. Your people were abandoned, forced back into isolation on Earth, left to believe they were alone." Ethan staggered back. His chest burned with a mix of rage and disbelief. "You're saying they lied to all of us? To me? To my whole planet?" Lyra met his gaze. "Yes, and the worst part. Most of the galaxy believes the lie." Ethan stared at the flag again, his fists trembling. For the first time, he felt the weight of a truth far larger than himself. But before he could speak, the chamber shuddered. A low alarm echoed through the stone walls. Lyra's eyes widened. "They've detected us. We have to leave now." Ethan's pulse spiked. "Who detected us?" "The overseers," she hissed. "They guard this place. If they find us, we're both finished." She grabbed his wrist and pulled him toward the exit. The wall rippled open again, and they rushed back into the library. But already, heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Metal boots, multiple. Ethan's throat went dry. "They're coming." Lyra's voice was sharp. "Run." They darted through the aisles of books, weaving between shadows. The sound of pursuit grew louder, voices calling, strange weapons charging. At the edge of the library, Lyra shoved open a side door and pushed Ethan through. They stumbled into the cold night air, stars blazing overhead. Behind them, the library doors slammed open and armored figures poured out. Their helmets glowed with crimson light, scanning the darkness. Ethan ducked behind a statue, heart hammering in his chest. Lyra crouched beside him, her eyes fierce. "They'll hunt us now," she whispered. "You've seen the truth? That makes you dangerous." Ethan swallowed hard. He looked up at the stars, the same stars his ancestors once dreamed of, and felt a fire stirring in his chest. "They can erase history," he whispered, "but they can't erase us." Lyra's gaze lingered on him, as if seeing something she had hoped for all along. "Then hold on to that fire, human. You'll need it." The armored overseers spread out, searching the grounds. The hunt had begun. And Ethan realized, from this moment on, there was no going back. The challenge, the night air was sharp, carrying the sound of armored boots behind them. Ethan and Lyra ran through the Academy's stone courtyards, shadows stretching long under the alien moons. "They're gaining," Ethan gasped. Lyra didn't slow. "Then we must turn, not run. They'll never stop chasing us." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You mean fight them?" Lyra's glowing eyes met his. "Not just fight, challenge." Before Ethan could respond, a squad of overseers stepped out from the shadows, weapons raised. Red light painted the courtyard, reflecting off their armor. "Traitors," one of them growled through a metallic voice. "You have entered the forbidden chamber." "Surrender now," Ethan froze. His hands clenched, but he had no weapon, no plan. Lyra, however, stepped forward boldly. "According to ancient law," she said, her voice ringing out, "a challenge may be declared. Trial by combat, before witnesses. Do you deny the code of the Founders?" The overseers hesitated. Their helmets turned slightly as if exchanging glances. Ethan saw their grips tighten on their weapons, but none fired. Finally, the leader stepped forward. His armor was larger, marked with deep crimson lines. "You dare invoke the Founders' law?" Lyra lifted her chin. "I dare." The courtyard fell silent. Other students had gathered at the edges, watching wide-eyed. Whispers filled the air. No one had seen such a challenge in years. The overseer leader turned his gaze to Ethan, scanning him with cold light. "And the human? He is nothing. A myth at best." Ethan felt anger rise in his chest. "Then prove it," he said before he could stop himself. His voice was steady. "If I'm nothing, you should have no problem defeating me." The overseers laughed darkly, the sound mechanical and cruel. But the crowd reacted differently. Whispers turned into gasps, and Ethan noticed the students' eyes. Curious, almost hopeful. The leader nodded slowly. "Very well. The human will fight." At dawn, Ethan's stomach dropped. He had just sealed his fate. The night passed in tension. Lyra led him to an abandoned training hall. Torches flickered along the walls, casting shadows over broken weapons. "You're insane," Ethan muttered, pacing. "I can't fight armored aliens with claws and weapons." "I'll die in seconds." Lyra stepped close, her voice low but firm. "Do not underestimate yourself. You saw what happened in the chamber, the flag, the truth. You are proof that humans are more than the galaxy remembers. That alone frightens them." Ethan shook his head. "Courage doesn't stop blades." Lyra's expression softened. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "No, but wit does. You are not expected to overpower them. You are expected to surprise them." She showed him old weapons, staffs, practice blades, and a set of strange orbs that glowed faintly blue. Ethan picked up a staff, heavier than anything he had ever held. His arms trembled. "This is hopeless." Lyra watched him carefully. "Hope is what the overseers fear. Show them that humans fight not with strength but with heart and mind. That will be your weapon." Ethan practiced through the night, clumsy and awkward. But with each swing, each stumble, something grew inside him. Not skill, not yet, but resolve. At dawn, the courtyard was filled. Students crowded the edges, their voices hushed. Overseers stood like statues, glowing red eyes fixed on the arena. Ethan stepped into the circle, the staff in his hands. His heart pounded so loud he could barely hear the crowd. The overseer leader entered opposite him, carrying a blade that hummed with energy. The sight of it nearly made Ethan collapse. "Last chance, human," the leader sneered. "Surrender and admit your weakness." Ethan swallowed hard. His legs trembled, but then he saw Lyra at the edge of the circle, her eyes locked on him, steady and fierce. "No," Ethan said, louder than he expected. "I'll stand." The overseer raised his blade. "Then fall." The match began. The overseer lunged faster than Ethan thought possible. Instinct took over. He dodged, barely escaping the strike. The crowd gasped. Ethan stumbled, lifted his staff, and blocked the next blow. The force rattled his arms, nearly breaking them. But he stayed standing. The overseer laughed. Weak. But Ethan remembered Lyra's words. Wit, not strength. He glanced at the ground. The sunlight reflected off the smooth stone. His mind flashed back to the predator he had once faced on Earth, the one that bowed when he turned its own light against it. An idea sparked. He waited, heart hammering, until the overseer struck again. Ethan spun, using the staff's polished surface to catch the sun. A beam of light flashed into the overseer's visor. The alien staggered, blinded. The crowd roared in shock. Ethan struck, not with brute force but with precision, jabbing the staff into the overseer's side. The giant stumbled, armor cracking. Gasps filled the courtyard. The overseer roared in rage, swinging wildly, but Ethan kept moving, forcing him to chase, forcing mistakes. Each time, Ethan used the light, the angles, the environment. Not strength, cleverness. Finally, with one desperate strike, Ethan knocked the overseer's blade from his hands. It clattered across the stone. The courtyard fell silent. Ethan stood, chest heaving, staff shaking in his grip. The overseer leader knelt, humiliated. Whispers turned to cheers. Students shouted, some raising fists. The sight of a human defeating an overseer was something no one. The new student. The morning bell echoed through the halls of the Galactic Academy. Strange lights flickered on the walls, showing symbols in dozens of alien languages. Students filled the corridor, scaled, feathered, glowing, and sharp-toothed, each different, each proud of their own species. But today was different. A human boy walked among them. His name was Ethan, and he was the first human ever placed in this academy. His steps were steady, but his heart raced in his chest. Eyes followed him from every corner, some wide with curiosity, others narrow with hostility. "Is that a human?" whispered a girl with silver horns. "I thought they were extinct," hissed another, her skin shimmering like glass. "He looks so weak," laughed a third, her fangs flashing as she covered her mouth. Ethan heard every word. He kept his head up, pretending not to care, but inside he felt the weight of being the only one of his kind. The classroom doors opened with a soft hiss. Rows of alien girls filled the seats, their eyes all turning toward him. Some smirked, some leaned forward with interest, but one pair of eyes, deep blue and glowing faintly, did not look away. The teacher, a tall figure with crystal skin, gestured to Ethan. "Class, today we welcome the human." She said it like a challenge, her voice sharp. "He will sit with you, learn with you, and be judged like the rest." Murmurs spread through the room. Human, among them? Impossible. Ethan sat in the back row. His chair was a little too large for him, designed for alien forms, but he forced himself to sit tall. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. The lessons began. Strange numbers filled the holoscreens. Alien history was recited in tones that made it sound like a prayer. Ethan tried to follow, but the words felt heavy, twisted, written for everyone except him. Halfway through the lesson, someone threw a small, glowing stone at his desk. It cracked with light and fizzled out. Laughter spread across the room. "Careful, human," one alien girl sneered, her sharp ears twitching. "This academy isn't for creatures like you." Ethan clenched his fists under the desk. He wanted to answer back, but he stayed silent. He knew one wrong move could make things worse, but then he noticed something. The girl with glowing blue eyes was still staring at him. Unlike the others, her gaze wasn't mocking. It was searching, almost knowing. When the teacher turned away, she leaned forward slightly. Her lips moved, but her voice was so soft that only Ethan could hear. "So, you're finally here." Ethan froze. What did she mean? The rest of the day passed in a blur. More stares, more whispers. Some students mocked him for being slow, others for being small. By the time the final bell rang, Ethan felt drained. He had survived the day, but he knew tomorrow would not be easier. As he walked out of the classroom, the glowing-eyed girl stepped into his path. Up close, he saw the strange patterns on her skin, like constellations etched into flesh. She studied him in silence for a long moment. Then, almost too quietly to catch, she whispered, "You're not what they think. You're something more." Before he could ask her what she meant, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, her words echoing in his mind. Something more. That night, lying in his small dorm room, Ethan stared at the ceiling. The stars outside the window shone like cold fire, and his thoughts refused to rest. Why had she said that? Why had her eyes burned like she knew him? He pressed his hand against his chest, feeling his heart beat hard. He didn't know it yet, but the moment she said those words, his life had already changed, because in a galaxy that had forgotten humans, one alien girl couldn't stop staring, and she was about to reveal why. The stares and whispers, the second day at the academy, began the same way. Ethan walked through the halls under 1,000 stares. But now the whispers were louder. Look, the human boy came back. Didn't think he would survive one day. He must be stubborn. Or stupid. Some voices were cruel, some curious, but none were welcoming. Ethan kept walking, his shoulders stiff. Every step reminded him that he didn't belong here. He tried to ignore them, but the words pushed into his mind like sharp blades. When he entered the classroom, the laughter started. One alien girl stretched her long fingers into claws and hissed at him. Another, with insect wings, buzzed loudly and joked, "Careful, he might break if we touch him." Ethan said nothing. He had learned already, if he showed anger, they would enjoy it. If he showed fear, they would smell it. But once again, in the corner of the room, the glowing blue eyes followed him. Lyra. She didn't laugh. She didn't whisper cruel things. She simply watched, her expression unreadable. The lesson began. Today's topic was galactic history. The teacher spoke of wars fought long ago, alliances made and civilizations destroyed. Humans were not mentioned. Not once. Ethan's jaw tightened. His people didn't exist here. It was as if Earth had been erased from memory. When the teacher called on him, Ethan froze. "Human," she said coldly, "what do you know of the Second Dominion War?" Dozens of eyes turned toward him, hungry for his failure. Ethan opened his mouth, but the truth was clear. He knew nothing. He had studied Earth's history, not the history of alien empires. "I don't know," he admitted. The class erupted in laughter. "See? Useless. Doesn't even know the basics. Why is he even here?" The teacher's eyes narrowed. "If you cannot keep up, human, perhaps this academy is not for you." Ethan's chest burned with shame. He lowered his head, fists clenched. But then Lyra spoke. "He's new. Give him time," she said calmly. Her voice was soft, but firm enough to silence the laughter. The teacher frowned. "And why do you defend him, Lyra?" Lyra's glowing eyes flickered. "Because history is more than what's written in our books. Maybe he sees something we don't." The room went quiet. Some students sneered at her words, but others looked uncertain. The teacher did not argue further, and the lesson continued. Ethan sat in silence, but his mind raced. Why had she defended him? No one else had. After class, as the students filed out, the whispers grew louder again. Why does Lyra protect him? Strange. She never cared about anyone before. Maybe she knows something. Ethan gathered his things slowly, trying to avoid the crowd. But when he stepped into the hall, Lyra was there, waiting. "You shouldn't defend me," he muttered. "Now they'll mock you too." Lyra tilted her head. "Let them. Their words don't matter." Ethan frowned. "Then why do you care? You don't even know me." Her glowing eyes locked onto his. "I know more than you think." Before Ethan could reply, a group of older students approached. Tall, armored, their eyes sharp with cruelty. Well, the human," one of them sneered. "Thought you'd run back to your dying planet by now." Ethan stood his ground, though his heart raced. "Earth isn't dying," the older student laughed. "No, then why does no one speak of it? Why is it not in our histories?" The others laughed with him, surrounding Ethan. Lyra stepped forward, placing herself between Ethan and the bullies. "Enough. He doesn't answer to you." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Lyra. Defending him makes you look weak." Her voice was cold as ice. "Or maybe it makes me stronger than you." For a moment, the hallway held its breath. The older students glared, but something in Lyra's eyes made them hesitate. At last, they turned and walked away, muttering under their breath. Ethan exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," Lyra answered. "I did." She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Meet me tonight, outside the library. There are things you need to see." Before he could question her, she slipped away into the crowd, leaving him standing alone with his thoughts. That night, Ethan sat in his dorm, staring at the clock. Her words echoed in his mind. "Things you need to see." Finally, when the academy grew quiet, he left his room and walked toward the library. The halls were dark, the air heavy with silence. His footsteps seemed louder than ever. As he reached the library doors, he saw her waiting. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly in the shadows. "You came," she said softly. "What is this about?" Ethan asked. Lyra looked around to make sure they were alone. Then she whispered words that made his blood run cold. "Your people are not forgotten. The Academy lies, and I can prove it."